I really appreciated the conversation at the table.
Yeah.
That's obviously, I think, the highlight of it.
Yeah, it is. They did a really good. It was funny because when I went home, I went to tell Katie about it because Katie's newer to the Methodist world, and she was like, "Well, what exactly is love feast?" And I thought I was like, "It's almost pub theology, just without the beer." And
But, yeah.
Yeah,
How can we include that?
Right? I was like, that would be great. Just the idea that you come together, you have something to talk about, and you just share at your table. So it's just kind of funny to see. I thought I did a good job with it. I've seen it where people kind of make more of a joke out of it, and it's just like, oh, it's just a cheap communion, and you can do that if you're not ordained yet or something like that. So it was cool to see it used in a good way.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
All right, how shall we use our time?
Well, I was thinking as I was walking over, I was like, well, I could do the last process reflection, and I feel like that's cheating if I just talk about my baby for an hour. But what was it? A couple things that have been bouncing around. I think it almost feels like more of reflecting on where I've come with some things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, for example, the working relationship I have with my colleagues at Braddock Street. I had a meeting this morning because they're getting ready to do Vacation Bible School, which is a lovely time in the summer, and we're having our Calling 21 intern. Are you familiar with that program at all?
Carl just told me about it. Yeah.
Okay, well there you go. We have an intern that will be coming in June, and Joanna asked if I could drive to Richmond on Tuesday to go to represent our church for the meeting because she has another meeting. Sure. And it's funny because it's just like I felt like I had gotten so much better at having the working relationships with her and Kirk. And that's mean today. It was like every other thing, there was some kind of like, I'm lacking the correct adjective. So I'm going to just describe it and maybe you can help me find it. But it was, someone asked something about the intern and we were like, well, we don't know who they are yet. I was like, well, maybe I'll know more after Tuesday. She's like, you won't know anymore. You're basically just going there to take notes. And like this almost shrinking my role type statement that at least now I don't actually internalize it, but then I started noticing it more, and it was just like, what is going on today because of that? We have a workshop on Saturday I have to drive to, and I was like, well, it takes this long to get there. And she's like, well, no, it takes this long to get there. I was like, well, it depends how you drive. It's like, that's true. Kirk drives really fast. I don't know how you drive. It's just like, what? You don't need to say those kind of things. I don't know why we're saying those kind of things. So I don't know if Carl mentioned I texted him and I texted Heather and I was just like, I feel like sometimes Joanna is a first-year seminarian with like a save the world complex. And it has to be like, you can agree about something, but if you don't word it the way they word it, you're still wrong feeling. That was just very present in my mind today from that. But being able to at least get to the point where like it doesn't matter. Like, yes, how we work together matters, but I'm not here to change Joanna's personality. That is something I just have to be able to live with. And if we are able to do good work together, despite our personalities being different, that's fine. Which I feel like compared to when I was first talking to you all about it in September, and I was just like, how does this work? What is wrong with the world? So I feel like there might be some growth in there somewhere.
Okay, well, claim it.
Right?
Claim the growth.
Complete with the sarcasm on the side as I process the growth. But it was that. We we had the meeting with the counselor.
Oh, yeah.
Was that, I guess that was 2 weeks ago now. And it kind of drove some... We're still waiting to get the resources we're supposed to get a list of, but she said she would send us that. And Erin in the meeting had said her understanding of what it meant to be disabled was that she was broken. It was the first time I ever heard her actually articulate how she felt versus just saying, I don't know, or crying or yelling or whatever. And so I think I may have been the only person actually excited that she said that. What I told her was like, I look at this as I get to talk to you in the language you actually speak versus trying to talk to you in like Spanish. And
Hmm.
that's how my understanding of how this is going. And she laughed at me, but it was one of those, like, I think that meant something to her. And so I went to leave, and I was like, all right, well, trying to be better about this. What she loves to call 1 o'clock in the morning. She's called at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 10 o'clock in the morning, whatever occurs to Aaron to call. And so, like, that doesn't really work. So I know you don't like text messaging. What's the best way we can communicate? And so this week she mentioned, like, email would be the best way we could do that. Okay, we can start doing that and seeing where that goes. On the side of it came this, like, my mom and I having a conversation about frustration she had that, like, she, how often Katie's parents come visit and are with baby, and how often she is with baby, and that whole dynamic that I'm sure is not unique to our family. But I think being able to say, I'm still working on saying this the right way, but it's like, I can't worry about how these things are perceived. Like, I can just try and do my best to communicate to you, like, I love you and I care and I want you to be part of Michaela's life. I also don't want Michaela around fighting a lot. And so that needs to be understood along the way from here. I don't know if it actually is. I think my mom might still be on the page of, like, it's a competition thing. But I at least could, like, my mom wouldn't have said anything in the past. So the fact that she even came out and said something.
Competition between her and Katie's parents.
Yeah. To my mom, she feels I'm not home because my dad is gone. I don't have anyone to relate to. And I have said in the past, like, well, yes, it's hard to be home because dad's not here. That's different than I'm not coming home because dad's not here. And so working on, okay, how can we clear up this understanding of this is not a, first off, it's not a, like, it's between me and my mom. I'm telling her that it's between me and you. It's not a thing with Katie. It's not a thing with her parents. It's none of that. If I don't feel like coming home sometimes, and it's, while we all miss dad, that's not why. Like, I struggle with the tension and feeling like I'm not good enough if I'm not coming home, because that's how I feel because of the visceral reaction if I'm not home long enough. And we talked about it for a few minutes, and I was mentioning, like, that's why I went to counseling. She was like, well, you forced us to go. And I was like, well, yes, I did. Like, I don't want to force us to go. She's like, well, I don't need it. And then said something along the lines of, like, my family never talked about their feelings. Dad's family never talked about their feelings. We're just not very good at it, but I don't need counseling. This moment of, like, well, small victories. We'll take what we can get. And I'm going to go not cry in a corner or something over that. But I was hopeful with some of the growth that came out of it. And I think I'm just now trying not to, is it compassion fatigue, is that the term? When you care about so many things and you just kind of run out of juice. How to, maybe it's a good question to talk about, how to belay that in some ways. I know self-care is helpful with that, and while sleep is no longer a thing that I get a whole lot of, being able to still run a couple times a week and been living into that, and working on the spiritual disciplines is good. There are times where it's hard to connect the spiritual discipline life to these particular things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the things I think in reviewing the video of our last session, something I didn't catch when you said it was that you feel as if there's an aspect in which you get pulled back into the situation with Aaron and with your mother. And I guess I'm going to make a parallel here with an experience
Sure.
that I had with my son. I'll just tell you a story. He had a rough teenage years, rough adolescence. Got involved in a lot of things that he shouldn't have been involved in, and suffered consequences academically and socially and otherwise. He'll be 26 in the 1st of May. And there was a point where, partially it was of my fatigue, and partially hearing something that Kenton reflected back to me, that in some ways my getting pulled back in and experiencing, I need to save him, or I need to, to do that, was maybe doing less good than I thought and that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a point where I had to say to him, well, I felt compelled to say to him, I don't know if I had to, but I felt compelled to say to him that I know that he has all the tools and gifts that he needs to be able to manage his own life.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm not worried about him.
Mm-hmm.
And but I had to back that up,
Mm-hmm.
that statement up, by being much more neutral with him and not letting my anxiety take over to the point where when he called, it was a crisis and I needed to
Drop whatever was
drop
going
him
on.
to go to whatever, or he's not going to be able to do this, I have to do this for him.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, as I have pulled back from that, he has taken more responsibility
It's awesome.
for his life and for his own well-being. And as I reflected on what you said last time, and I probably didn't listen very well to what you were saying.
There were a lot of words in your
I
defense.
no. I found myself wanting to give you more advice than probably was helpful. But part of my question is, just wondering how you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Of how do you get yourself? How do you delegate your mother's life and Aaron's life
To them.
back to them?
That's a really good question.
Because you're running 4 lives.
Yes, it's a lot.
It's a lot of lives to run.
And so, part of why I was thankful for that, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, whatever amount of time it was I actually said out loud a lot of things I haven't said before.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, in hindsight, part of well, I probably didn't say them as well as I could have, but trying to communicate, I can't. I know presence of time is important to my mom. I cannot be here more. I have Katie and Michaela and a job, and I said out loud that I also need to care for me. For a long time, I don't think I really recognized it until I will go ahead and just give Katie credit for saying this explicitly. Your mom always asks when your time off is, never thinking that maybe you just want to do something else with your time off instead of go and try and help her. That did not go over well with my mom, which I guess blah blah and Bowen, that makes sense because it's pushing against the pattern and all that stuff. But she took it as, I don't care because I'm not home. and that was it. She mentioned how she saw the same thing happen with her brother, who is the youngest of 6, and he had all older sisters, so God bless him for that dynamic of life. But he also left home and like didn't really come back. Still has a relationship with all of them. It's not, I mean, he's in the Air Force, so I think it was if he wanted to be distant, he had an excuse for it.
He's up in the air.
He's up in the air, he's in Alaska, he's in like Florida. And everyone else, up until my grandmother died, all lived in Northern Virginia. And so, drastically different for everybody else. And why I feel like that's where I get stuck, is like trying to communicate what's in my head, which is, yes, I'm taking a step back, but it's not the distancing step back, it's just the like hands off step back.
Yeah.
And it is received, regardless of my ability of speaking, as I want to be away from you. And so when I think about how can I delegate their life back to them, Aaron is someone I can tell, like, I trust you to be an adult. There are things that, because of this disability, that you'll need someone to walk with you more on. But that's a thing. That's okay, and it doesn't make you lesser of a person. With my mom, for someone who loathes mental health awareness in such a way that it's not just tough out whatever's happening, I'm now realizing, like, well, I wonder, I know autism isn't hereditary, but are there other anxiety type behaviors that are driven by my mom that would be helpful to know about or would be helpful to care for, that again, I could learn how to speak to those better if I knew what they were. And I think when I get to that point in processing is when that fatigue comes in, and it's just like, I want to say, just I need you to get over yourself long enough to hear what I'm saying and not just interpret it in your point of view. That won't work with a mom to say it that way, but you get the idea.
Yeah. You know, I really do hear that this is overwhelming, and it makes sense that it's overwhelming. And I can't imagine myself in your shoes, because it was, yeah, it would be really difficult. But I have a theory, and the theory is that, and I think Bowen theory backs this up, that if you, and you mentioned being stuck, if you are able to get yourself unstuck, chances are that, or there's a greater likelihood that your mom and Aaron will be less stuck.
Sure. So, wanting to live into that, hearing that, for me, I think probably based on my family growing up, and I'm actually surprised because I mentioned this to Mom too, is like I had the role of keeping peace. And so it's really hard for me to cause conflict, and so I don't tell you a lot of things I'm feeling. My mom asked me to, okay, well, can you tell me more often? Yeah, I can work on that. But because of that, if I try to do what is healthy, but it's received as something that's hurtful, like, I don't know, like, it almost feels like a computer going, like, cannot compute, like, these things can't go, like, if it hurts, it can't be healthy. And I know that's not entirely true. There are things that we need to do that are probably going to hurt, but that's part of changing a pattern and eventually coming to awareness of, like, well, that wasn't healthy in the first place. I think along with the understanding of doing that, I'm afraid of, maybe a little afraid of just running out of time for my mom to get there, and some fear that, like, her story will end during the hurt and not getting to the, you're right, this is a healthier way. Which, this is the first time I've articulated that in that way. But I suppose that would probably drive some of the trepidation and, like, completely jumping off the edge of the pool for that versus sticking my foot in. So, yeah. And can you get stuck twice? Like, you get unstuck from one thing and then step into another thing and be stuck in that?
I think stuckness can be a pattern.
Okay. So stuckness is a pattern. That, from what I'm hearing in class, implies that there's something in me that leads me to get stuck, right?
There's something that's a part of your reactivity to something. For example, I think that patterns that we exhibit growing up, patterns that we learn, are also often patterns that show up in the family that we choose. Mm-hmm. It also shows up in our work life. So, you have a pattern of overfunctioning when it comes to your mother and Aaron. Mm-hmm. And they have a pattern of underfunctioning in the midst of your overfunctioning.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you've heard me say it. What would theory suggest?
That my role is to try to function more along the midline, which is going to cause a reaction in Mom and Aaron because suddenly I'm not doing what I've been doing, and that's going to look like anger and look like hurt and look like frustration. And the best role I can live into is maintaining the new normal and communicating that this is what this is. That this is what I feel is a healthy level of functioning. And I believe both of you are capable of functioning in the gap.
Yeah. So Peter Steinke, who's also a Bowen theorist,
I've heard his name somewhere recently.
Healthy Congregations.
That was probably it. Yep.
Will say that if in the midst of people trying to either sabotage us or draw us back into an old pattern of functioning, if we are able to withstand their anxiety, then the system becomes less anxious.
Because you almost model that it's not.
Yeah. If they know, eventually Aaron and your mother would know, okay, I can't pull him back in.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. It means we're going to have to relate in a different way. Mm-hmm. But if you were just, okay, to hell with it, I'm going to, all right, give me the checkbook, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
That doesn't help the system.
Sure.
Okay. All right, so that's overfunctioning and then being able to withstand the resistance of you functioning differently.
Yeah.
All right. But that pattern may show up at work too.
I think, as we're talking, I don't know how to, again, if we come up with a name for it, when people are annoying to me, I usually just not let them be annoying. That gives me too much power. I don't point anything out, and it's not just people can be annoying, but then there's a next step of they exhibit behaviors that aren't constructive during a meeting. Mm-hmm. And most of my experience has been, I'm just going to deal with this, and it's almost like everyone kind of has that understanding, like this is just who this person is, and so we're just going to let this happen. I haven't been there long enough to know if anybody else feels as go home adamantly as I do about, when you go home reacting about it as I do. But that is it possible to be over-functioning in your patience with things? Is that a thing?
Can you be overly patient?
Yeah.
In other words? Probably.
Or if patience not the right word, then I don't want to say it's enabling, because it's enabling to me implies that there's some kind of encouragement to it. But I guess just passive.
Yeah.
towards it.
Well, passivity does have an enabling
Yeah.
function, I think. At least how I think about it. You know, the more we're
That's fair.
passive in the face of bad behavior.
Yeah, if Michaela were to hit me and I wouldn't say anything, then she would never learn that you can't
Hitting
do
is
that.
bad.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think, like, what goes through my head is you know, is this worth having a conversation about? Don't want to be that person that brings us up, that kind of thing. And usually the answer is like, I have 70,000 other things I would rather do than try to have that, broach that conversation. And it's not because, I don't believe, it's because I fear the consequences of it. It's just I don't want to have to be the one to do that. And so that could go one of two ways. That could be because I'm so tired of having to be the person to do something that in a sense I'm under-functioning in that role versus over-functioning in patience. I'm under-functioning in accountability, for example. Coming out of over-functioning for what feels like everything else over here. That's probably more realistic than I just over-function in tolerance of bad behavior. And so, I forget how I got to here, but talk about the patterns of, there's a pattern of over-functioning, under-functioning, and so when you over-function somewhere, you under-function somewhere else. That's probably an example of that.
Yeah. And you had talked about, can you be stuck in multiple places at one time? And I think you can be stuck in a pattern of over-functioning. You can be stuck in a pattern of under-functioning. You can be stuck in a pattern of distancing. I mean, you can get so stuck in your pattern that your awareness of it disappears because it becomes the way of life.
I think that's what feels so intense about CPE is like, I know there's a movie where they have a scene. It's like, it's the Matrix where like he sees the numbers for the first time, or like sees that there's a hole in the Matrix.
You got me.
We'll make up a scene where that happens.
Okay.
But it's just like you notice the pattern so much more often, and so you find yourself running through all those like questions that require actual honest thought every single place you go. and that's that to me is just as overwhelming as anything else about the time that we're here. It's one, like you don't leave CPE where in school, right? You go home and these are things that are going to be going forever. Hopefully, if we're doing what we're supposed to do, these are patterns we're supposed to notice. And I think I've known that my home pattern is unhealthy for enough time, but it's again being able to put words to it and understand. Okay, this is why this is happening, which is helpful. But I think we talked about too, like why is the sixth most important question we can ask versus like how do we get here? What do
It's
we
the
do?
least most important question we can ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The least important question.
Yeah.
Throw some extra words in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a dance right now. It feels like of okay, I can stop over functioning here, but then I feel like I step right into under functioning, and it's not that the other foot goes to over function somewhere else, but it's like it just feels weird, and so it's like well, put this one here and then put this one back, or
Well, the theory is that this is where your guiding principles really can be your friend.
yeah.
So, it's, we want to be aware, we want to yada, we want to do that. But if we were just kind of to simplify it a little bit,
That would be nice.
Okay. Is that if we have a set of principles that are applicable anywhere we go, with anybody that we engage, then we are much more consistent in our responsiveness and in our behaviors.
So, an example of that would be like, I will, as a guiding principle, I will share show my care for people by doing X, Y, Z. And so, making sure I call once a week or something like that, if I'm doing that, in theory, if that is what I choose to be, how I show care for people that are close, because obviously I can't call everybody in the world, but just trying to process this out.
Yeah.
Then I can go back and say, well, Mom, I understand this is what's important to you. This is what I can do to help show that I care about what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I think being able to define yourself according to your own principle,
Mm-hmm.
and say, out of that principle, this is what I'm able to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's yeah, I think that's the way that we gain a modicum of self-regulation, self-control.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we become consistent in how we are able to deal with people, I mean, think about it on terms of your ministry.
Yeah.
Okay, if you are if you externalize all your feelings,
Mm-hmm.
okay, every day, okay, your parishioners will probably be contacting your bishop.
Right. Skip over Larry. Just go straight to the bishop.
Just go straight to the bishop and say, ma'am, would you mind?
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay. And I think where a lot of people misunderstand Bowen theory
Mm-hmm.
is that we're not denying our feelings.
Right.
Okay. We're not encapsulating our feelings. We're letting our feelings influence how our thinking process goes, and we're allowing our thinking process to influence how we feel and how we express those feelings.
Working as a team almost.
Working as a team.
Yeah.
There you go. And when they're working as a team, then my behavior becomes much more consistent.
Right.
Now, again, it's all on a continuum and it's very fluid.
Yeah.
Okay?
And we never get to 100, and if we do, then Jesus is sitting next to us.
Yeah, it's something like that. Right. You
Yeah.
got it. You got it. So, yeah, I think your description is spot on of saying you don't have to tell your mom what your principle is,
Mhm.
but you could. You said, Mom, I hear you. I really understand what you are desiring from me. My principle right now is that my principle, my priorities are blah, blah, blah. But, this is where